Welcome back to the Dadabase. I'm here with Mike Gardiner. We're on our third episode here, so
thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Of course.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Now that I've got a nice beer, I've got a Warsteiner Oktoberfest. What are you drinking today?
I'm drinking the Warsteiner Dunkel.
Very nice choice. Very nice choice. We're at an undisclosed location that we won't.
Has a bunch of German beer.
Right. German music, all of that. And you provide some really new insight to dads that we haven't had before. You've got 2 children, and you have both a daughter and a son. Fantastic kids.
I love them.
They're really, really cool. I would like to start off by you telling me a little bit more about them. So we'll start off with the oldest. Tell me what you love best about Ada.
You know, Ada's the firstborn. That's what you said. Is the oldest there. She is just amazing. She's 11 years old, in 5th grade. She's old for her grade. She's an October baby. And kind of an old soul, you know, if you will. A little quiet, a little reserved. But man, I will tell you this, and it's certainly not true now, but when we were talking about having another baby, I was like, I'm not sure I can love another baby. I love Ada so much. I don't know if I can love another baby. Now, of course, it all worked out, and I love Felix to death as well. But like, I loved her so much that, yeah, it was just she's kind of bookish, but she also loves playing basketball. She loves wrestling.
Wrestling.
Yeah, like, you know, tackling daddy and beating up on daddy and that kind of stuff.
Well, every kid loves that.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
But, no, she's just fantastic. I couldn't say enough about her. She's, I don't know. I guess I have no good detail there or whatever, but like,
no, that's great. What I'm really after here is just the outpouring of dad love here. So that's good. That's good. So covered Ada. Let's talk about Felix.
Felix is 7. He'll be 8 in March 2018. And he is kind of the opposite of Ada in almost every respect. So where Ada is a little bit bookish, he is got all the energy wound up in his body that you can imagine. But he still loves to read. He loves to read when you make him read, whereas Ada loves to read just on voluntary purposes. But you know, smart as a whip, but just that thing where he's just always dancing. He's dabbing all the time. He taught me how to dab. I think that's how you do it.
That's impressive.
No, thank you very much. Yeah. And you know, his grandmother literally we went on vacation to all the places we went to. He dabbed in front of the signs for all of them, and we sent them all to his grandmother, and she made a photo collage of all of his dab photos, and it's over his bed now for Christmas. So anyway, yeah, it's just like he's just all the energy. He's boom. He's, you know, coming down the stairs at 6 in the morning like a herd of elephants and all that stuff. Whereas Ada, you know, you go in her room like, hey, what you reading, kiddo? And she's like, oh, I'm on the 3rd book of this series, and I love it, and blah blah blah. And she's just cuddled into her bed, and you can talk to her about it. So it's 2 really different kids, but man, they're just amazing.
Yeah. Well, and you were talking about it. Felix, from an outsider's perspective, is an absolute ball of flailing energy all over the place.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see him as someone who doesn't have a son, to see what that looks like, and to see him living up to a lot of the stereotypes that you hear of little boys as they grow up, and just having all of that energy. He's a very thoughtful kid, and he's I think in a lot of ways he reflects a lot of your goofiness.
I'm not sure what you mean.
You don't know what I mean. Listen, there's a phrase that says that you shouldn't BS a BSer. As a goofy dad, I know one when I see one.
That's fair.
And we've been around that block a few times ourselves.
Okay.
And when it comes to trends such as dabbing, they officially die when they get into our hands. white men over 40
Oh, yes, absolutely.
kill trends left and right. So I'm very glad that we get to do this.
You know what, though? Felix doesn't care. I got to tell you, he was watching his favorite YouTuber, and this YouTuber was going on and on about how dabbing is dead. Like, look, it was a whole episode about how dabbing is dead and you shouldn't dab anymore and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, hey, Felix, that guy kind of seems like, he sounds like, dabbing's not cool anymore. He's like, I don't care, I'm still dabbing. I'm like, right on, man. Keep on going. It's funny you mentioned stereotype male kids. I think one of the things that I love best about my kids is that neither of them have a mean bone in their body.
Not at all.
And I mean, a lot of kids don't have a mean bone in their body, but I get concerned, that you have some sort of a Damien from the Omen kid in there somewhere that all of a sudden he likes magnifying glasses on bugs or something like that. And a lot of that's environment, whatever. But I just love the fact that they really don't. There's a lot of energy, and he'll kick you in the nuts if you're not careful. But he didn't mean to,
right? And
I know that, right. So you're not going to get mad at him for kicking you in the nuts over and over again.
Well, you're absolutely right. There isn't a single mean part of them. I feel like Ada is much more skeptical, and that's been the case since she was like 3.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because she will shoot you a glance that'll cut you down no matter how old you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember her being at our wedding and trying to interact with her a little bit. She's like, no, you're not my dad. I'm not going to talk to you.
Your wife took a fantastic picture of Ada doing that.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite pictures of her.
Yeah. Oh, well, just
very squinty-eyed.
Oh, yeah, she gives me crap all the time. And I love it. And the interesting thing that I've been teaching her a little bit is how to take it. Because she'll give me crap, and I'll give them like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And it's a more cutting remark than the usual dad jibes or whatever. And like, oh, well, I guess you get your head out of the book and you might have noticed that I was blah, blah, blah. And she's like, hey, I'm just kidding. We're going back and forth here. You give me crap for the last 10 minutes, I'm going to say something like that. And not to be mean, but to say like, that's how people kind of interact sometimes. And you can interact, you can have a relationship with somebody that's got a back and forth to it, and you both love each other, and you know that no harm is intended, and of course you're just kidding, but the things you're saying about me are just as bad as what I just said about you. So realize that if you have that relationship with somebody, you're going to have to be able to take it as good as you give it.
Right. Well, yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I just had a conversation with Bailey, my 15-year-old, just 2 days ago. And
who I love. She's 15? Jesus.
She's 15. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Anyway, so we're having this conversation, and in talking with Bailey, she said that there were times where any one of them would come up to me and ask me a question. And they would say, Dad, can I ask you a question? No. And they were going to ask me the question anyway, so I'm just goofing around with them.
That's a dad joke, yes, absolutely.
Right. And then, if they started walking, we'd be like, of course you can ask me a question. What are you going to ask? But I always thought that I was portraying it as just kidding around and being goofy. And it turns out there was a number of times that she took me seriously on that. And it left me feeling just shattered on the inside, that she didn't realize that I was kidding. And that the comments that I was making, as innocent as they were, cut her so deeply as a 6 or 7-year-old. And so it's made me realize just how much I have to watch with those conversations. Now, what you were talking about, where if she's giving you crap for a good 10, 15 minutes, it's a 10-to-1 sort of ratio. For every 10 comments that they might give you, you might give one back that might push a button a little bit. But it's not like you were commenting on her weight or this or that, or the other thing. Nothing that would have had any sort of detrimental effect on her, I can't imagine.
Well, my girl's, she's 11 years old. She just turned 11 in October, 3 months ago. And I'm currently unemployed. I'm getting back in the market right now. But I've been taking some time over the holidays to enjoy the holidays, enjoy the family, get back in shape, hopefully, go for a lot of walks, stuff like that. So last night we're playing a game.
New year, new me.
Exactly.
Yes.
Permanently, though. we're playing a game last night, and it's like you say a line, and then you try and guess what the answer to it is. So the line was something like, "What do retired people do?" And they're like, "Well, I know what people that don't work do. They take a lot of walks." Wow. Do the crossword, and I mean, like, I'm like, damn, man, you're really breaking out right now. So she has that capacity, but she's also a very sensitive soul. So, like you say, like, you know, and because the kids can do that back and forth to themselves, and I think they don't care. But all of a sudden, your dad comes out, and they're like, you know, say blah 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 blah, and they're like, what? Yeah. I don't. I'm like, well, sweetie, of course I'm kidding, you know, but if you don't. You're kidding too when you say those things, when your parent does that, it's totally different than when anybody else does it.
Right.
So it's you have to get a good read on where your kids are at as far as those things are concerned. It's being able to sit there and look at them like, "Are you okay?" Like, talk about what just happened. Like, you look like you're a little dejected there, ripping on your old man, and then he comes back with a good one.
Right. So what sort of special time do you spend with them individually? Do you schedule out specific events for Ada and specific events for Felix?
I think that I spend a lot of time with my kids, especially over the last few months, but I'm the one that's has been home after school. God knows what happens after I get a new job, but had been lucky enough to have a flexible schedule at work, so I got home after work at 3, or 4, and could see them. And Christina and my wife didn't get home until 6, so I had a couple hours to spend with them. And I think Ada has a lot of alone time that she likes to have, so spending time with her is more of a scheduled thing. Like, Ada, let's go to lunch, or Ada, let's go do this. If Felix is around her brother, she honestly doesn't want to be around him right now. Sure. So she's like, I'm going to jet while he's there, and he likes to latch himself on. So he's engaged, he wants to be engaged, and he forces that engagement, and so she kind of moves away. So a lot of time I spend with Felix is impromptu, because he wants to hang out, and he's just there. Well, we're going to watch football. Like, yeah, I'll watch football with you. Let's wrestle around or whatever. Ada's less likely to come down when that happens. So scheduling the time with Ada, or just today even, he happened to go upstairs to his room, which he's taken to doing more often now instead of being out in the living room. And she came over and talked to me for a while. And the trick with her is that she just loves to talk about things like her book. And she'll talk about her book, go on about her book. She'll talk about her book for 15, 20 minutes. And it's like, but it's like a plot line. Like, and then Joe did this, and then the cat came over and they did this, and then the cat came back. And like, it was really funny because the cat was like, oh, batting Joe's face. And then Joe walked out of the room and Mary came in. So you kind of have to be like, oh yeah, and that time, to me, the goal there is just to be there when she wants to see me, and talk to me and stuff like that. My long-term goal for my kids that they can't do, but I hope they do, is that they want to spend time with me forever, so that in the future they still want to come home and hang out with Dad and do stuff and all that kind of thing. So I'm trying to figure out all that. But I don't know, we spend a lot of time as a family, so we're the alone time is a little bit difficult to come by sometimes, I'll be honest. So it's hard for one parent to take the one kid and go off and do something without the other kid getting jealous. And so, we have trouble, I think, scheduling that. I think now that the kids are older, Felix is certainly not toddler, he's in 2nd grade, but, now that they're really kind of into their own thing and can be on their own a little bit, it's going to be easier to schedule that time.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm a little long-winded, people have told me.
That works perfectly for this venue, so we can go as long as you want.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, so how did having a daughter change you?
I've always identified with women. So when I was, after I turned 5, my parents got divorced. And so I lived with my mom for the most part. I saw my dad every other weekend and every Wednesday. And my relationship with my father was great. I'm sure we'll get into that later. My relationship with my mom was great. But when I lived with my mom and my sister, which I spent the majority of the time at their house, our house, I was living with 2 women. So I grew up living with women. I've always actually I had better friendships with women than I had with men. I was much more afraid, I will tell you this, of being a parent to my son than I was of being a parent to my daughter. I was more confident even before I become a parent at all in being a parent to my daughter. I was excited and all ready for it. And when I was like, son, I'm like, shit, how do I tell him about this thing or that thing? Because I was never that much of a, not a man's man, I guess. I don't know what the right answer is. But like parenting a boy, I was much more afraid of than parenting a girl.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? What was the question?
Well, I was just curious how
did it change me?
Yeah.
It didn't. It really didn't. Like I say, it was something. So I wanted to be a dad all my life, and I think I wanted to be a dad of a daughter all my life, and so I was, obviously parenting changes you, but at the same time, that
specific gender didn't.
Yeah.
For that sex,
yes.
I should say. So what sort of changes have you seen in yourself since having a son?
I think being able to handle that energy. I was a little boy once. Hard to believe. And I was a bookhound myself. Like, I just kind of sat around and read books. I didn't have the energy. And my sister had the energy. So she literally, you'd hear the piano playing, and she was like literally as a toddler crawling around on the piano keys and, up where she could fall off and crack her head. So I have always had this like low key, yeah, let's chill and read, yeah, no problem. And so it's not necessarily a gender specific thing, although he fits the mold of a boy, but that whole thing of being able to tolerate somebody just, all that kind of stuff, but having a good time, like we're having fun, like, we're playing tackle, we're doing whatever. And that just being able to sit there and handle that is new to me.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, did you feel any sort of familial or societal pressure to have a son to carry on the Gardiner name?
I saw this on the previous episodes, which I highly encourage people to watch.
Thank you for the plug.
No problem. Oh, by the way, there's a surprise question at the end, and I think this is important to say during the early parts of the video, that there's a surprise question at the end for everybody to answer, so stay tuned. Not just for me. What was the question?
Did you feel any sort of societal pressure or familial pressure from your family to have a son?
I saw you ask Aaron this question, and I thought about it, and I was like, I wanted to, but I had it more logistically planned out, which was the idea that, okay, Christine and I got married. She didn't change her name, which is fine. Her name is still legally Robertson. My name's Gardiner, but we agreed when we got married that the kids would be named Gardiner, because at the time, Dave. We assumed that there would be.
What are the odds that he's really going to watch this?
Robertson children. Oh, we're going to make.
Hi, Dave.
Hey, Dave. We're going to make. Dave, my brother-in-law, would have children, and there would be Robertson, which is my wife's name. Children running around, but the family. So the question then becomes carrying on your father's line versus carrying on the family line, because there are certainly male Robertsons out there. I think. Certainly on various sides, I think. Sure. Yes. Maybe not. I don't know. They might all be girls. They may have all been girls.
Well, there's Dave.
But yes, there is Dave. Well, the interesting thing is that, of course, nowadays you can't be guaranteed that the kid will take any one parent's name or anything like that.
Yeah.
But if I thought about it from a logistic point of view, my dad had two sisters. One sister had two sons. They weren't having kids. Various reasons. The other one had a daughter. Her son's name is not Gardiner. So I'm like, oh, well, I don't know a lot of Gardiners. I would like to actually have my kids have my dad's name. So I didn't feel pressure at all. At all.
No pressure. Okay.
In fact, when my dad and mom had me, as my mom tells it, which I see no reason why it's not true, she wanted my middle name to be James, which is my father's first name. And my dad's like, why? I don't want that. And it ended up being, she cocked him into it. He had issues of other sorts. But so it wasn't important to him, is my point. And it wasn't important to society, at least as far as pressure on me is concerned. But it was important to me that the Gardiner name somehow continued.
Cool.
Not knowing any family members other than me that would do so.
Right.
Right.
So you were talking about your father. What's your favorite memory about your father?
Oh, man. We had a great time. So probably camping and hunting. He and I, there's a comfort level there, when you're fine hanging out with your father. It's funny, like my favorite memories certainly are probably hunting or camping or working on something or something like that. But there's also the memories where you're just sitting there watching football and you're not talking, but you're so comfortable with one another, you can sit there and not talk and it's fine.
Yeah.
It's a very guy thing, I think, to sit there and not talk and watch sports. But at the same time, that's probably the most family moment that you could have, is to sit there and just kind of be with somebody, right? But yeah, he taught me to hunt, he taught me to fish, he taught me to camp. I was a scout, Boy Scout too, but at the same time, I mean, I had all that stuff going in. Just a lot of the things I love to do are things that he and I did together.
So are those things that you would do on those weekends that you would have together then? Mm-hmm. I take it that's how you'd spend your time together most of the time?
Yeah, he would, if you can imagine, so this is a guy, and I hate doing this, and this is why I feel terrible for my children, because we don't do it as often as we should, but weekend camping, where you've just worked a full week, and he had a pretty stressful job, as far as he would say anyway, work a whole week, and then on Friday, you as the sole parent, and my mom was a sole parent too, don't get me wrong, would pack up the entire truck with all of the camping gear, sleeping bags, and everything for 3, an adult and 2 kids, and go camping. And oftentimes the boat, and get the boat ready so we'd go water skiing that weekend.
Wow.
For the weekend. So for 2 nights, and you didn't even get up there and get camp set until it was dark.
Right.
And so you're really just there for the next day.
For Saturday.
Yeah.
And then it's all
and then you have to pack it all up and everything. And certainly when we were younger, he had to do the entirety of it himself. When I was older, it was my sister and I are 5 years different. She's 5 years younger. I would help him when I could, as soon as I got old enough. But yeah, so he loved camping that much. And I love camping, but I'm never in the mood to do that on Friday. Ever.
Right.
So, because I know it's like, Anyway, which sucks, and I would actually, what I intend to do with my daughter is try and my son, whole family, whatever, get up in the morning on Saturday, first thing, with the car packed, then go camp out and, fish and do whatever. And then, if we want to sleep overnight, we'll sleep overnight. If not, we'll come home. Like, we can go up to Mount Hood and do that and things. So, anyway.
Sure. Awesome. So how are you like your dad?
Well, the things that my parents were a lot of things. My dad passed away 4 years ago. Probably wrong. I'm not very good with dates, especially dates I don't want to remember. But I think it's 4 years. So, they got divorced. They both had their own issues. My mom's still around, of course. She's great. But my dad's issue is generally anger. So, and not something he necessarily directed at us very much, but certainly had potential to get pissed off inappropriately. But what he always did was love us. So the best example I can think of is, so every Wednesday and every other weekend, by the way, the guy loved dating as well, but he never had a woman over. Never, ever had a woman over when we were there. And not that matters. I wouldn't have cared. But at the same time, the whole point was he wanted to dedicate that time, whatever it was, to his kids, right, and not to anybody else.
He didn't divide his time between you,
right? Because he had another weekend, next weekend to go and
right,
whatever. So that's just an example of love. And I guess my point was, and I'm not saying it very well, but he loved us. My mom loved us. No matter what, with all the divorce stuff and this and that and the other thing, we always knew that they loved us. I think that was the best trait they had. And so that love and engagement was what I try and distill on to my kids. Like, I had a bad day. And it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to be grumpy, right? I'm grumpy, I'm going upstairs, I need a little time to myself or whatever. Like, actually saying that to my kids, I feel helps them understand that stuff happens, it's okay. Daddy's not mad at you. Daddy's just kind of crabby or whatever. And how you resolve your differences. But when I'm with you, I'm engaged with you, and I love you, and that's what this is all about. And so that permeates everything else you do. Yeah. So, where I say like, oh, I want to take my kids fishing. Well, that's just an extension of that,
sure.
So, I still love hunting and fishing and camping and doing work outside and building things and stuff that he taught me how to do. But as far as a trade is concerned, it's probably what it is.
Would you consider yourself a better father than your dad?
Left field question.
Yeah.
My dad, real talk, did not consider himself to be a good father. So, he always shorted himself as far as his self-esteem, as far as being a father is concerned. For various reasons I won't go into, but it's past stuff. So he was always real down on himself about certain things. He always thought I don't think he thought he was a piece of shit or anything, but he didn't have a real high opinion of himself. And so, he tried extra hard. And he was a good father. He had his shortcomings just like everybody else. And, I do too. I think I think looking on fathers that, for our generation, in the 70s, they grew up in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. And what they thought of was parenting. Like, for instance, my grandfather, my mom's dad, tangent, but important. My grandfather, everybody loved my grandfather, right? And my grandma just passed away, so some of this stuff came up again. But everybody loved my grandfather because he was creative and he worked at PGE and he built all these cool things and it was so awesome. And my mom just remembers loving the hell out of him and all this kind of stuff. But my grandma just passed, and we were talking about, and my grandfather passed away in 1980. And we were talking about holy shit. And this is her and her two brothers. God, I guess Dad kind of used to come home and he'd sit down and put on his slippers and read the paper, and then he'd have dinner, and then he'd go in the basement and shut the door, and we wouldn't see him until it was time to kiss him goodnight.
Wow. Okay.
Right. But they remember this creative guy, nice guy when you're with him, blah, blah, blah. Right. Not a great father, right? So to look back and say, that father from the 40s who was in the war, who maybe didn't want to have kids, but that's what you did, and you were locked into all that stuff. So what kind of father was that person? Well, we remember it as being great, and then it turns out, great for the time. Who knows, right? So then you look back and say, all right, what were their kids like? So what was my father like, whose dad died when he was 20, totally different generation, totally different attitude. Probably his dad whooped him with a belt. So he's like, well, I'm not whooping you with a belt, so I must be doing okay. Right? So he's like, what the hell are you so upset for? I'm just kind of angry. I'm not hitting you. Right. I think that's good, right? Now, don't get mad. Don't show any emotion at all to your children because it's bad. It's a different...
The expectations change between the generations.
Right.
I can appreciate that.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't think I'm qualified or have the right to say I'm a better parent or not. It's a totally different time than when he was a parent of me 20 years ago, or more appropriately 30 years ago when I was in formative years, age 12 or 13, right? So to me, it's just completely different. There's no.
It's like comparing a quarterback from 1940s versus
look how well they handed
Tom
off
Brady.
to the running back.
Right, exactly. Forward pass.
Yeah. Oh, look, they could kill people back then, and now Tom Brady just gets every time he gets breathed on, there's a penalty called. Yes, it is, and also I'm happily married, and he was not. He was a second-time divorcee in 1980 when I was 5. So, as much as my mom also was a single parent, that was hard on her. Certainly not discounting that. Totally different, completely different. Did he do the best with what he could? Absolutely. Did I have a great time with him? Yes. Did he have his own problems? Did those problems affect me? Sure. But I assume that, you know what? here's the question I want to have for future generations. Like, when your daughter goes to a psychiatrist in 20 years, what is she going to say about the problem she had as a kid?
That's a great question.
I mean, there are going to be some, right? So what are those going to be? Like, I don't even know. Like, you breathed on me wrong or something. I don't know. I don't breathe on my daughter, folks. Anyway, sorry.
How dare you? So we're going to take a very quick break, and we'll come back and address some of these other questions.
Okay.
And we'll pick up where we left off.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Okay, Mike, we're back. Good break?
Yes. Excellent.
Fantastic. You got so much accomplished.
We did, actually. I felt really good about it.
Yeah.
I read the term paper I've been meaning to write for a long time.
So I did a little bit of research before. I gave you a chance to read through this. Hopefully you found this valuable as I did. It's from Dr. Lyndon Nielsen, who is a professor at Wake Forest University. And she's been studying the father and daughter relationship since the 1970s. She started doing classes on it in 1990 and has written multiple books in regard to the topic. And given that we both have daughters, I wanted to get your insight on some of these different pieces. I'm just going to read some of the pieces here and then address a question or two in regard to that. And I'd just love to have your feedback on that if I could.
Definitely.
Cool. So in here, she's talking about the positive and negative effects that fathers can have on their daughters specifically. In exploring this area, uppermost on the minds of many is a young woman's academic and vocational path. How her relationship with her father influences her academic performance and, as a consequence, her career success and financial well-being. As you might guess, daughters whose fathers have been actively engaged throughout childhood in promoting their academic or athletic achievements and encouraging their self-reliance and assertiveness are more likely to graduate from college and enter the higher-paying, more demanding jobs traditionally held by males. Thoughts?
I think that, it's interesting. So, how do I impact my daughter's career? So, I want to start off by saying, and this may be a question coming up, so forgive me if I step on it, but what do I want my kids to do with their lives? If I had advice to them as to what they would want to do, I'd want them to be happy, which I know is an answer that's been given before because I watched this video. But I also want them to be responsible for themselves. So, in other words, you can be an itinerant musician traveling the country and hitchhiking around as long as you're safe and as long as you're doing odd jobs to earn money so you're not mooching off people, right?
Sure.
So, you can be happy. You know, you can be poor and happy, I think, absolutely, and you can always come home to my house and do your laundry and I'll feed you and whatever. So, anyway, I think by saying, what I mean by saying that is that the idea of success, career success, academic success, or whatever, in this day and age is being questioned heavily. So in other words, is it right to want to be as aggressive in those male-oriented jobs as they are? I don't know, that didn't finish the right way, but in other words, so putting women in those jobs that are aggressive and competitive and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff is great, but is it right at all to have a work climate in which it is aggressive and competitive and people can't get ahead? So, and I realize this is a bit of a tangent, but that is kind of my question. Like, well, what is success? What does that mean? Success means you're happy, right? So in societal standards, success means you make money and you've got a good job and you're doing blah, blah, blah. But for me, you know, and 8 is 11, so we're going to start having these conversations about what do you want to do and things like that. And I want her to think about those things. I don't want her to just think she can lay around all her life. But at the same time, the idea of success that we have traditionally embraced as a society is being questioned right now, and I think it's right to question it. So what does that mean for her in the future? Do I want her to have the same bullshit corporate job that I usually have? No. You know, I do that because I like my house. You know, and I'm hoping that in this career transition that I have, I'm going to find a job that I love. That would be great. But at the same time, if I find a job I like that pays the bills, I'm good. So that's a long-winded way of answering the question. I'm not sure I really did it justice there, but I try not to influence. I don't talk about work when I come home.
Mm-hmm.
I want her to read. I would love for her to do math. I would love her to be interested in science. I would love my daughter to do all of those things, and we certainly encourage all of those things. But what that means for her as a career, I don't know. And like I say, as long as she's happy and responsible, I'd love to add critical thinking is in there as well.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Those are my goals, but like, how do you force that? I'm happy for her. So, if she wants to volunteer somewhere and be taken care of and not really making any money, but she's doing good work and doing all sorts of neat things and she loves it and she's happy, then I'm happy for her.
Okay. So you brought up a topic that is also kind of near and dear to my heart, because I think we've both been in the same sort of spot, career-wise, where there are things that we wanted to do beyond what we are currently doing. Mm-hmm. And we've run into our own hurdles or roadblocks in order to be able to do that. And I can't speak for you, but in speaking for myself, I held out in a job that I wasn't happy in a prior position with the company that I'm in now, for too long. Mm-hmm. I settled because I felt like I was so close to what I wanted to do that maybe if I just stick it out another year, maybe if I do this or that maybe that success is around the corner, when maybe the better choice would have been to just cut and find something better that was more aligned. And so I settled for too long. That's what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. And I worry about the sort of example that set for my children, in that I'm doing this job that I don't like for whatever reason, and that it's okay to settle when you should be more aspirational, and that you should be trying or doing more in order to accomplish the things that you want to do for your dreams. Certainly responsibility comes into play. Mm-hmm. Just as you were talking about. You want to be able to make sure that you can pay your bills and provide for your family, mm-hmm. and put food on the table, all of those sorts of things, and maybe have some left over for some recreational thing for the entire family. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, figuring out how you explain to your children, especially the ones that are really young, that when you see me coming home and I'm grumpier more days than I'm not, mm-hmm. because I'm so unhappy with work. You can take work-life balance into that. You can look at the idea of doing that settling in order to make sure that you're providing, rather than finding a way to make those particular dreams happen. Mm-hmm. I'm curious to know what your thoughts on that in your own journey through your career.
Well, my thoughts on that are pretty. I don't know if dichotomous is the right word, but I think it is. And they might be kind of depressing to some people, but for me, it's about logic. Okay, that I have 2 kids and a wife, and I live in a nice house, so I don't have to live in that house. Right. But I do have 2 kids. I chose to have those kids. Once you choose to have those kids, or once you have those kids, regardless of whether you chose to have them or whatever, anyway, you're now responsible for the kids. Once you get married, you're responsible for the relationship between you and your spouse and providing in some way, equally, in my opinion, for each other, right? So you get married, you're now responsible for another person. You have kids, you're now responsible for more than just you two. So I bring this up because my dad at one point said, Mike, you love wine. I love wine. You should open a wine shop. You know what? I'll help you. I'll give you the seed money. I want you to open a wine shop. I want you to be happy, because he saw me, and I was in a corporate job. I've always had corporate jobs. And at the time, I was in a shitty movie, whatever. Anyway, he's like, you should open a wine shop. You love wine. Well, I know people that own wine shops. They're not happy. Because it's not easy to run a wine shop, right? And it's not like you're drinking wine all day in a wine shop. You're trying to sell wine. And you know what? People who buy wine are kind of assholes sometimes. So, and you don't know if you're going to make the mortgage because, nobody's buying wine in September. Now, December comes along and you get all the Christmas, or November and December, and you get all the Christmas money and everything like that. That, frankly, for a wine shop, that example pays for the rest of your year.
Right.
Those 2 months. If you don't make enough money in those 2 months, you're effed in many ways downstream, right? So that's not fun, and my thing would not be wine shop. It would be writing. I want to write. I want to write. But a professional writer to make enough money to make a living that I'm accustomed to, frankly, there are not very many of them. And I don't mean that to say that I make that much money. I just mean writers don't make that much money, and they don't have insurance, and they don't have anything, right? So it's like, all right, well, I've got to logically say that I'm at a point in my life where I can't quit my job and professionally write. So that sucks, but to me, it's actually freeing because I can make a decision and say, well, that means I've got to do these things. So now my goal in finding a career path is to find a company that I want to work for, that when I go to work, I actually like what the company is doing, right? Not a huge corporation, as I think you and I both work at, and stuff like that. So, and I'm not commenting on what your situation is, but my situation, since I don't work for them anymore, it was a big company and like all the corporate BS and all that stuff. So my goal is to find a place where I can go work and do what I do well, which is management and, trying to bolster teams and team building and project management and all that kind of stuff. And love it, and just really love it. And that means the company has to be that good. So I know I'm digressing a little bit from what you're saying, but that's the point I was trying to make with happy and responsible. And that means here's a huge box of condoms, kid. Don't get knocked up.
That's a fantastic segue into the next part that we need to cover here.
But that's really it. Unless you're ready to be responsible for another human being, you need to use protection. You need to understand that you might be caught up in a moment or whatever, but you better be taking care of that. Whether it's being on the pill or using a condom or whatever. But I'd rather use a condom because then you're protecting yourself from everything else. But for God's sake, don't bring another kid.
Or both.
Mm-hmm. Or just never have sex. Just kidding, obviously. Because that's going to come up, I'm sure, too, is how do you talk to your daughter about sex. But, that to me is it. You can be responsible for yourself when you want to be an itinerant musician and travel around the world and do all those things. But the minute you bring something else into it, and, you have to be responsible. And that's when you're like, and the good ones step up and say, all right, I got to stop doing this thing now. And that's what you have to do. Stop doing this thing. Stop and start earning enough money to support whatever situation you've just created.
Sure. No, I really appreciate that feedback. It's something that I wanted to discuss with you since I know that we, at different times, have been somewhat in the same sort of spot. And it can be really hard to try to reach for those particular dreams when you're also trying to provide for a family.
Yeah.
And so I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sharing that. For me, where I'm at right now is in a good spot with my company. We'll see how that changes in the near future here. But I'm very appreciative to have a job. So we'll leave it at that. Next part here is getting back to Linda Nielsen and her studies. She brings up another question on many people's minds is, how does a father influence his daughter's romantic life, who she dates, when she starts having sex, and the quality of the relationship with men? Not surprisingly, a girl who has a secure, supportive, communicative relationship with her father is less likely to get pregnant as a teenager and less likely to become sexually active in her early teens. This in turn leads to waiting longer to get married and to have children, largely because she is focused on achieving her educational goals first. The well-fathered daughter is also the most likely to have relationships with men that are emotionally intimate and fulfilling. During her college years, the daughters are more likely than poorly fathered women to turn to their boyfriends for emotional comfort and support, and they are less likely to be talked into having sex. As a consequence of having made wiser decisions in regard to sex and dating, these daughters generally have more satisfying, more long-lasting marriages. Their better relationships with men may be also related to the fact that well-fathered daughters are less likely to become clinically depressed or to develop eating disorders. So, thoughts?
Well, I think it goes back to the communication. So it's about building up trust, right?
Right.
So that they'll talk to you about stuff. And, you talked into sex, I don't know, like, say, though, like we just talked about before, like, as long as you're using the condom, sex is fine. Like, if you want to have sex or something like that, like, sure, don't have sex if that's not what you want. Don't.
Consent, right.
Right. But you also shouldn't put a stigma on sex as a woman to say that, frankly, in my opinion, if you are of age and you want to have casual sex, as long as you are using precautions and protection, that should be okay, because that to me is a different model. And this is true, and this is where I think we get off track when we think of, I'm a liberal person. And a lot of times liberals think that everybody feels the same way they do. And I know that there are moms out there that are calling their daughters whores and lauding what their sons are doing, because boys will be boys. Moms are doing that, and dads, just because they want the same sexual activity. So in my mind, saying that, hey, look, whenever you want to have sex, if you're of age, you can have sex. Just use protection. And that, so building that, but back up a little bit. So that's how I feel about the sex part of it. Look, if you want to go out and have a one-night stand with somebody, I think that's fine. Just use protection. You know what I mean? Whether you're healthy emotionally should not necessarily relate to that. If you're healthy emotionally, that's because you have a background of healthy relationships with your father and your mother and your friends. And that helps you become a healthy emotional person. And so to me, those relationships you then build and become a significant other to somebody in a truly mutual relationship, that's where all that comes into play. Sex obviously has a part in that, but okay.
So
Did I consolidate that effectively? I don't know.
No, you did great.
Okay.
You did absolutely fantastic. I'm curious then, have you talked with Ada about sex?
No. No, not yet. I intend to. It's a mutual thing. So I mean, interesting. It's my wife and I obviously co-parent, and we are both effective parents to our kids, I think. So Christina has kind of taken the reins on that one. So I have not personally had that conversation with her because she's 11. So I'm thinking as she goes through certain changes and things like that, I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm staying out of it, but once in a while I'll ask her, like, hey, do you have any questions you want to ask me or anything like that about stuff? And I'll leave it at that. I think when she becomes 13 or 14, I'll probably want to talk to her more about sex, not from a you're changing perspective, but truly just about sex and about, hey, sex is great, it's fun, talking about sex and saying, here's how to be careful about it, here's how to do it in a way that makes everybody happy, you safe, and all those things.
So, what grade is she in then?
She's in 5th grade.
5th grade, okay.
Yeah.
So, at some point, the schools start having that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I typically don't use this podium in order to make grandstanding sort of suggestions. So this is entirely unsolicited advice. You can tell me to do whatever, but I might suggest that you have that conversation before it happens in the school. Mm-hmm. Not that I don't trust the schools in any way, shape, or form whatsoever, but making sure that she is aware of that conversation. You said that she's talked with your wife already about some of these things, but it's worth having the same discussion as a dad with them so that they know that it's a normal thing, even if it's awkward the first few times, so that you can talk about it at a later point. Or even just joke around with it. My oldest, well, not my oldest daughter, my daughter Anna is in a lot of medical classes. She wants to be a doctor when she grows up. And so she's going over a lot of those different things, including the reproductive system. And she's a junior in high school. But we've been joking about those sorts of things since she was in middle school. So that it's an easy, regular, normal topic. It's not an awkward thing that they can't come to me and talk to me about now. And I feel like it's helped a lot in our relationship that she knows that if I can come talk to Dad about sex, then I can talk about anything.
Right.
So,
well, so this is a question for you, having 87 daughters. Because it's going to be a scale tipping, right? So my daughter's in 5th grade. Right now, the conversations, I'm sure, with my wife are all about your changing body. Right? And not necessarily about sex. It's about your changing body. And, I know, if I remember correctly, the 5th grade thing where all the my grade school, all the girls went off and the boys were just out on the playground and what the hell are they talking about? And then we figured out they were talking about sex. And then I heard all the 5th grade stipulations about what sex was and all the weird no, I think it's anyway.
No, please do go on.
No, I'm good.
If you can demonstrate, that would be even better.
So no. No. No, but that conversation was about changing bodies. And so where does the tipping point happen? The one with the teachers had with the girls was about changing bodies. Where does the tipping point happen where you stop talking about, and I'm asking you this, stop talking about changing bodies and start talking about it as sex?
I think it's all part of the same conversation. As you well know, 5th grade boys are idiots.
Yes.
And when they see changing bodies, they are going to comment on it. And so it's part of that preparation of, listen, you are going to grow breasts. Your hips are going to grow wider. And boys are going to comment on the fact that you now have boobs. And you have to steel yourself. Other girls are going to comment on the fact that you have boobs or that you don't have boobs. And you need to be emotionally prepared for how cruel that other people can be. And coming from a male perspective, we're just fascinated by the fact that you have them and that at some point we might be able to touch them in some way. And so we will make up reasons to touch you and touch you inappropriately. And you need to be ready for that. We might ask you, can you touch your elbows behind your back?
So
Don't fall for that one.
This fascinates me. Okay. This really fascinates me because what I'm talking about is actually the positives of it. So when do you start talking about it to your daughter? So my dad's conversation with me about sex. Yeah, he told me about the nuts and bolts of it, but that was 10 minutes. And then he talked about how great sex was. And my dad, I'll come clean here. I was a late bloomer in high school, didn't do a whole lot. My dad had sex when he was 13 years old in the back of some woman's car somewhere or something like that. So he was like, you're going to have sex when you're 14. It's going to be great and you're going to love it. And here's a box of condoms for you in the bathroom. And I'm 12 years old right now. I'm I don't know what the hell you're talking about. So his conversation with me was all about the positive things and about how fantastic sex was. And so what I was actually asking you about, because yes, there are all of those things, is about when you can say no, sex is great. You're going to want to have sex, and that is fine. Your body's going to want to, maybe not. It's going to want to have sex. So when you have that conversation about how it's normal to want to do that, and it's fine. In my opinion, you should wait till you're X age, but some level that's your decision. But as long as you're using protection, that's what's really important. Do you have those conversations?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That does happen. And I think in my experience, you talk about all of that generally at the same time. And sometimes it can be a little overwhelming. And sometimes you say, okay, we're just going to talk about this for right now, about your changing body.
Mm-hmm.
In a couple of days, I'm going to come back and see how you're sitting with this. And we'll talk about some of the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All of this is leading to a path where someday down the road, you're going to have sex. And it's your body. You get to choose when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to a discussion about consent. That leads to a discussion of what your hard limits are, of what you are comfortable doing, what you are not comfortable doing.
Mm-hmm.
And telling them that, yeah, ultimately, that end goal or the end result, if you're very lucky and you have a good partner and that you're choosing good people to have sex with, that's a lot of fun. You just have to be ready for that as best you can and make sure that you're making good choices leading up to that. Make sure that you're choosing somebody who's kind and who's considerate and is taking care of you as much as you are taking care of them. And talking to them about protection, about like, you can believe and love the other person and trust them implicitly. Mm-hmm. And yet, you still should use protection because the urge to have sex can be overwhelming. And people will say things that they didn't necessarily mean by saying, I've never had sex before. And the next thing you know, you've got an STD.
Right.
So please practice caution and keep your head about you as those flood of emotions come over you and you're like, okay, I'm ready to have sex. So it can be part of that same conversation, all depending on kind of feeling out the room of like, is she ready for this, or should we revisit the topic in a couple of days, give her some chance to digest that information. So I guess that's my thought on it.
Yeah.
Does that help?
No. It does help. It's a comment on our times that conversation I had with my dad was so positive. And granted, believe me, he did instill in me a consent idea as well. But that wasn't necessarily part of that conversation. It was all about how you're going to love having sex and it's going to be great and sex is fantastic and it's really great. And it's a comment on our times really about that our conversation with our daughters has to be more protective, and one thing I do wonder, and maybe is when I look at the kids at my daughter's school, I see a lot of pretty healthy boys, frankly, and nobody's, we went on a big camping thing in the fall, I think, and there wasn't a lot that was inappropriate going on there. Now they're only in 5th grade, and this means they're stupid and they're not mean and icky and whatever. But I'm curious if good parents are also raising good boys. So if you talk about good dads with good daughters and all that kind of stuff, the same can be held true with boys and saying like, look, you can't just go out there and try and lay on people, right. And not just that. That's too late when you're having that conversation. You have to be built up to be a good people. You have to be woke, right? I mean, you have to be awake in this society and understand what's right and what's wrong, which is different from what was right and what was wrong in the 70s, which is different from what was right and wrong in the 50s, right? So in today's day and age, where I still have the conversation, obviously with the daughters, but I hope that perhaps they have healthy relationships because the boys are healthy as well, and yeah, I mean, but it's a sign of our times that there's skepticism there. You know what I mean?
I don't necessarily agree. Only because I can't speak to what it's like to having a son. what my dad shared with me about having sex, he would be upset with me for saying this, but it essentially came down to leave my porn stash alone. That's not for you. The real truth is
You had to buy your own? That's terrible.
No,
I don't have any money, Dad.
It's not a thing that a 12 or 14-year-old kid can go off and buy anyway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's do this. Let's reset it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a quick break.
Yes.
And then we'll come back and we'll discuss a little bit more.
Okay.
Cool. Welcome back, Mike.
Hey, thanks, Matt.
Thanks for ordering up another beer.
Yeah, long time, first time.
I'll take your answer off the air.
Oh, okay.
That's good. So we were talking about
how I taught you how to play fantasy football.
Right. And that has come in handy more than you know. In fact, I have a trophy with my name on it.
Really?
To reflect the fact that I've learned so much from you. I can't remember who I beat, but
I think it might be recorded on the trophy. Actually, I think you you started a tradition where you recorded the name of the person you beat and by how many points.
At least how many points?
How many fractions of a point that you beat them by.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely don't have a loser trophy on my mantle right now. So
not right now?
No, I'm being sarcastic.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Anyway.
How is that whiskey, by the way?
I'm on a dry month right now.
He says, holding a beer.
No, that was fairly obvious to the listeners at home, so I went like that. So you didn't need to. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, you were going to ask me a question?
Yeah. So you would ask the question about when do you get to tell them that sex is fun? Is really kind of what it came down to. And yeah, you can tell them that. My approach to it has been, I need to tell you all of these other things because these things are the ones that are really important to me and I think that are going to have an impact on your life prior to having sex. Mm-hmm. Once you decide that you are ready to have sex, then I want you to have a good time doing it. So choose good partners. Mm-hmm. Be safe. More than anything else, be safe. Mm-hmm. But once you've got those two pieces down, you're being safe and responsible, you've got a good partner, have all the sex you want. Have fun.
Right.
Go for it. Which is a weird thing to be telling your kid, but it's there. And it's like it's your body to do with as you want. Whether I say you can or not isn't going to play into whether you actually have sex or not. Mm-hmm. You're not going to listen to me when that moment hits. So just please listen to me that you take care of yourself and your body and the rest will fall into place.
Well, as I've told you in the past, the conversation with my father, was a dad talking to his son in that case.
Right.
And, it's just somewhat a sad commentary on where we are or where we were in the 40s versus the 70s versus today, that the conversation he had with me was 10 minutes of logistics and sex, how it works, and then a whole bunch of like, no, it's great, you're going to love it, and here's a box of condoms and have a good time. And so now that conversation, I have to think what that conversation he would have had with my sister, I don't know if he had one or not, would have been. Would it have been all cautionary tales and everything like that, or would it have been the same one he had with me? Because ideally in this world it would be the same one we have with both kids, and they go off, both genders, and they go off and do the right thing,
right? Because
that's what society has taught them to do, but we're not there yet, and that's what's it was just an interesting thought process for me to sort of get around that. Honestly, because it would never enter my head to do anything like that to a woman, right? So I have to gear myself, frankly, toward thinking like that, to have, not thinking like that, but know that other people think like that, and to prepare my kids for that in that way. Outside of just raising them to be good people, raising my son to be a good person and not pressure women into sex and not do all those terrible, those things.
Right.
I have to specifically go into that with each of them from a different standpoint because of their genders, which is shitty.
So I lost where we were at.
Oh, just...
Oh, I know what I was going to say. I think that that's a conversation that you can have. It's actually in your hands as the progressive liberal in order to help progress society.
Oh, sure.
In order that you can have that conversation with your daughter.
But you also have to have the other one. And that's my point, is that conversation absolutely is one of them. But and so you have here were the changes that are happening in your body, and you have the sex is great, which are the only two conversations I ever had. But with a daughter, you have to have the third one, which is, oh God, watch out for all these things. Which, that's the part that I'm like, oh shit, okay.
So I'm curious, you wouldn't have that same conversation with Felix?
Well, I don't know. Well, this is where I'm like, I don't know. I got to talk to Felix about this, because my conversation with him is going to be really different from what my dad's conversation with me is, because we were really different people when we were growing up and in those formative years,
Sure.
So I don't know what kind of kid, what kind of person Felix is going to be when he hits his teenage years. I have no idea. So I think that conversation is going to adapt itself. The conversation I have with Ada is going to be specific to who she is. And same thing will be with Felix.
Sure.
I mean, honestly, like, who knows, right?
No, absolutely.
So that one remains to be seen, frankly. So we'll see.
Well,
but I would hope that by that point, let's say he's 9 or 10 or 11 or 12, whatever, he's not touching people inappropriately. He's not, snapping bra straps or anything like that, right?
Right.
Those are the things that I want him to grow up to simply be a good person, which I feel like he's on the right track now. And who knows what happens? I'm not saying anybody's perfect, but so yeah, like that to me is going to be a short one. Like, well, clearly you're not snapping bra straps, so here's the other things you shouldn't do either.
Right.
I'll tell a very frank story. And this is a complete joke on my part. I didn't mean it, but it was still inappropriate. I'll tell you what, guys said inappropriate things in the 80s and 90s that were appropriate, and then they really weren't at all anyway. But at the same time, I think we said them anyway. So I was sitting there with my dad working on his truck or something like that, and we were joking around about some girl or something like that, and I said, well, I'm not worried about it, because obviously no means yes. Did not mean it. I would never ever mean that. I was kidding. He came out from under that truck, though. I thought he was going to kill me. He's like, don't you ever say that again. And it was something where, I'd been in college and joking around, guys living in dorms together or something like that. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that it was the immature
stupid
things. And I mean, Obviously now we talk about locker room conversations. They're not right at all. And this is where I think things have changed. So this is 25 years ago for me.
Right.
I've certainly, grew up at that moment and never did that again. But I think people entering the locker room now aren't saying that as much. I don't know if that's true. That may be altruistic on my part. But those boys that are going into college aren't saying as many of those things. Certainly not maybe as homophobic, for instance, as they used to be.
Sure.
Certainly not as whatever. Hopefully the needle of society is moving in the right direction so that you just have less of that as an inherent aspect of teenagers when they get to that point.
I think a lot of times kids of that age, 20 and 15 and so forth, you try on different personalities. You try saying things out to see if it fits you and if you can get away with it. And when you're called out on it, you recognize that and take that in. To recognize that, no, this is not how a civil person goes about treating other people, even joking about it.
Yeah.
You come to that realization and you grow as a person.
Yes.
So I really appreciate you sharing that. There's plenty of times that I had the same sort of conversations or same sort of comments, and then after saying it, felt
Just
incredibly small and immature
terrible.
compared to everybody else around me.
Absolutely.
And you grow from those lessons,
I remember
hopefully.
like they were yesterday. Honestly, I can think of 2 or 3 other times in which I said something just stupid. And I was not that guy, right? And so you say it because like you say, I'm in a group of guys and I'm trying to fit in or something like that. And I don't have the courage to stand up to them and get out of their social circle because I'm with them, we're at a whatever, and we're doing whatever.
Right.
And they're all saying this stuff, and so I feel like I've got to say this thing. And it comes out, and you're like, oh my God, who the hell was that? Like, that's not right at all.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and you just, like you say, you feel small and terrible. And you learn from it. I think that's the important lesson here, is that you learn from that. And like I say, I remember those things like they were yesterday, even though they were 25 years ago.
Right.
So, anyway.
Getting back to the conversations that we have with our children in regard to changing bodies and sex and the positivity that goes along with that, I think that conversation between parents and their daughters has changed over the years. So it is progressing. It's getting to be a much more positive conversation. Whereas even in our teenage years, there was still quite a bit of pressure on women to be good. And you still hear comments of senators and congressmen saying that they should have kept a pill between their knees, or judges saying those sorts of things. And the sort of shaming that happens towards women who are just trying to have the same sort of sex life that men enjoy. So I feel like that's changing. It's a slow curve towards what you and I perceive as what's right. But I think that is slowly growing with generations. And so, not that I'm saying that you need to go home and get your daughter on the pill and have that conversation tonight, but I think our generation will help grow that and push that towards the direction that we feel is right. So, that's a lot of heavy stuff.
We're talking about something else now?
We can. Let's do that. So, let's see here.
It's real talk, though. No, it was anyway.
Let's see here. You know what? I've got a bunch of questions here. What inspires you as a dad?
My kids every day. That's. I don't know if that was the answer you're looking for there, but I want to do right by them. I want them to come out. I want to come out like, I think about like, okay. I think about how many years or months I have left until my daughter doesn't want to talk to me anymore. I'm like, okay, I got to keep everything positive until that happens. And then think about like, okay, how many years after that until she's ready to come back and talk to me, say 19 or 20 or something like that, and like come have a beer with dad or whatever. I mean, obviously the goal is that we have a great relationship all the way through and nothing ever changes, but I'm a realist. I've seen good dads have their daughters not want to talk to them anymore for a little while. And it's like, being able to weather that storm, that's not inspirational. But the idea that they come out of it at the end in the right spot, and I can't define what that right spot is, but that's my goal as a dad, to get them to come out of it at the end in the right spot. So I try to be inspired by them, just looking at them, thinking that's the inspiration. It's like that episode of The Simpsons. It's a great episode, actually. It's really relevant. Really relevant. So it's a flashback episode. They hadn't had Maggie yet, the baby on The Simpsons. And Homer was going to quit his job. They'd finally earned enough money for him to buy a bowling alley, I think it was, or something like that. And so he was going to quit his job. He was going to go buy a bowling alley. And he was like...
Work in the bowling alley, yeah.
Well, yeah. He was living the dream. So we were talking about before, and living your dream. And he was doing all those things. And Marge got pregnant. And he had to go slinking back to Mr. Burns and ask for his old job back that he hated. That he, I don't know if he pooped on Mr. Burns' desk, but something like that to get out of it. And so he got the worst possible job ever and all this kind of stuff. And he had this big sign, and I can't remember what the real sign said, but he had put up all of these pictures of Maggie around it.
Don't forget, you're here forever, is what the sign originally said.
Okay, don't forget you're here forever. But he put up all the signs, pictures of Maggie around it, and it said, do it for her. And that, I mean, I'm
that one
getting
got to me too. Yeah.
In the Simpsons episode. But that's the inspiration, right? You know, and I mean, it's altruistic to say you're just doing everything for your kids and all that. Obviously, I have goals and I want to do things for myself. And I realize that, you know, 7 or 8 years from now, Ada will be gone. And 10 or 11 years from now, Felix will be gone. And I need to have a hobby by then. So you got to figure those things out too. But I look at them and I you know, that's like every day you look at them and like, hey, good morning, sweetie. You know, let's get up. What do you want to do today? All that kind of stuff. And I still love it. So I'm still happy with it.
So in a way, the places that I draw inspiration from are not only from my kids, but from seeing other dads interact with their children. So in a mutual dadmiration society, I wanted to say thank you for your inspiration. There's been a couple of times in stories that you've shared or things that I've seen you interact with your kids that have stood out to me and have been like, man, I want to do something like that. That's really cool. There was a trip when Ada was young, maybe around the same time that Felix was born. You know better than I do. But just you and Ada went to Disneyland together. And you had a fantastic time. You created an indelible memory that she will likely hold on to for her entire life.
In theory, sure.
In theory, and look back on and say, like, Dad was the one who took me there. That's something that I always wanted to do with all of my kids, and that I hope to do at some point, is to have that vacation where it's just me and them. We'll do day trips. I'll take them out to the coast and play on the beach. Apple picking, that's more of a family thing. Everybody's there.
Well, but I think that was you. Anyway, two things on that. Number one, you're the OG for Dadspiration, sir. When Ada was born, a newborn baby, Matt, and I had first met you, if I recall correctly, right around then. So I left college then, so I met you at that party, the Christmas party, and then I think you came over with Sonia after that, or maybe slightly before.
Yeah.
So it was probably
we went to a dinner together and a couple other things. Sure.
Oh, there you go, right. Well, we danced to the college party.
So we did.
It's a good party.
It was.
So but you came over and you held Ada, and she'd been crying, and it was terrible, and I didn't know what I was doing, and blah, blah, blah. And you held her, so she was just balanced on your arm like that, and she just went to sleep. And it was amazing. And then you held her on your shoulder, and so that was my dadspiration. So thank you for that. Your daughters are amazing.
Thank you. That's more them than me, but I'll take it.
Well, and so that goes to my second thing in a second. But I did want to say that I actually went and saw my best friend from grade school when she first had her baby, and I got to pass that on. So you met her at the Labor Day party last year, I think. She was there. I don't know if you met her or not. I tried to introduce you. Anyway, so she's like, oh my God, how'd you know how to do that? I'm like, well, there's this dude standing right over there. But the second thing I have found, and I've taken my kids on some trips. I won't go into the specialness of them or whatever. And I went on trips with my parents too, right? So like, I kind of remember going to Disneyland with my mom and my dad. I kind of remember going camping with my dad. I remember going camping with my dad more because we went all the time. We went to Disneyland. I went to Disneyland with my mom once. It was a special trip. It was a big deal for her. We went 5th grade, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I remember it.
Right.
But I remember more sitting on the couch watching TV with my mom and cuddling and tickling and those more close moments than I do those big trips. So, and I think the same is true with Ada. I took my daughter and my son. We took her to France. We went to France. We went to Paris, France with my kids. And we went to the south of France. And we did it on the cheap. We did it like all this bargain stuff and everything. But it was still an amazing trip. My wife sprung for an Eiffel Tower tour, which she didn't when she took me there. But amazing trip, right? It's France.
Yeah, yeah.
Germany, all this cool stuff. Come home. Driving around downtown. And my daughter's like, Daddy. I'm like, what? What, sweetie? What's up? She's like, it's that thing from France. I'm like, oh, do you see a croissant shop? You see this? No, it's the Enterprise rent-a-car sign. Like, oh, it's the Enterprise rent. That's where we rented our car. Remember when we rented the car and you had to stand in line for it? Oh, that was so funny. I remember that. I'm like, do you remember going to the blah, blah, blah? And she's like, no. Like, oh, man. Oh, okay. No, she didn't remember a thing. So my point being that, like, I those things were amazing. That was her 5th birthday present. We went to France when he was 5, so that was his, and we went to this park there and all this kind of stuff. So they are amazing. That's what I was getting to before, though, with the whole, like, just love them. And I'm not saying you take them on trips, too. You want to go do those things, because those are amazing. But the things they remember are those times where you sat and played video games with them, or you sat and did whatever. That, to me, is what I remember from when I was a kid. I think that is true for other things.
Yeah, certain flashbulb moments of just memories that are ingrained into you for whatever reason. They just capture that particular moment. And they can be innocent moments like what you were talking about. They can be larger, grandiose moments. Mm-hmm. You never know when you're creating those memories.
Yeah. Well, when we went to Disneyland, all she wanted to do is talk to princesses. And she doesn't give a rat's you-know-what about princesses anymore. So when I think she looks back, we went on this one ride. I finally got her to go on one ride the afternoon of the second day, and she loved it. And she went on it 3 times. It was a raft ride at California Adventure. So I know she remembers that. But does she remember talking to the Tinkerbell's fairy friends? I don't know. She remembers making me stand in line for it. She really enjoyed that. Sorry, I didn't mean to ruin your dream.
No. I think it's great.
But you're the OG on that. So anyway,
I appreciate it. There's another story that you told me just last summer, in fact, where you were driving down the road with Felix. I can't remember if you had like the air conditioning on, but whatever it was, you had said that there was a Beastie Boys song that came on the radio, and you convinced Felix, despite his protestations, to roll down the windows and listen to the Beastie Boys while the wind was blowing in your hair and all of that. And you're like, no, this is going to be really cool. And you said that he really got into it. And that moment that story just kind of stuck in my head. Now, I don't have sons to share that with, and I don't know why that would matter. But it does feel like an innocent father-son moment that's really interesting to kind of live through you in order to see. And it's just a tiny moment.
Well, here's the thing. My kids hate driving with the windows down. I love driving with the windows down. So I'll do anything. I can't tell you. I mean, I'll be sitting there driving along in the windows. I've got my window down. I'm rolling along. I'm like, I love the breeze in my face and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, 5, 4, 3. Daddy, could you roll your window up? I'm like, yep, sure. But I will say that I also have a similar memory when I had my Toyota 89 Toyota pickup, and my daughter was in the front seat because there were no airbags, and she was turned around. And the Run DMC version of Walk This Way came on.
Nice.
And nice. She, as a baby, in a backward-facing seat, which is how young she was, she's like...
Nice.
Yeah. Nice. But yeah, it's... I don't know. The gender things... Felix hasn't shown himself as a gender yet. You know what I mean? He's only 7. So he hasn't... Other than the energy and everything else, he hasn't become a boy yet. So... that'll come, I'm sure. You know, and his interactions with other boys certainly are similar to that and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of yelling and screaming. But, like, that whole thing where you really become a boy and you're just a little more something hasn't quite got there.
Okay. We are actually running not short on time, but we're going to have to pack some things in.
Yes.
So
rapid fire?
We are going to do some rapid fire. You're absolutely right. And probably
because I watched the videos.
Right. And probably the same questions that you heard before.
It's all right. That's why I'm
prepared. I got a couple more in there.
My notes.
So we're going to take a quick break.
Oh.
And then we'll come back and do those.
Okay.
And address a couple other pieces. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, and we're back.
Yes, we are.
That was I've Got Whiplash.
Yeah. I drank a whole beer just to the exact point where you're at when we took a break. Not true, police of Vancouver.
Right. Well, I'm sure by the time that they watch this, it'll be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to do some rapid fire questions.
I'm in.
Okay. We've got about 20 minutes to fit some of these in. Last thing that you grilled and when?
I made a prime rib on Christmas.
Very good. Gas or charcoal?
Oh, you know the answer to that, Matt. Neither.
Neither.
I'm a wood pellet grill person. And I'm not actually a fanatic about it. I'm not a fanatic about anything. Truly, for a wood pellet grill...
Except for your rules about BLP.
Yes. The brown liquor party is sacred.
Yes.
But for grilling, you can smoke something. If you want to smoke it all day, that's fine. Then you need a smoker, and I get that. But like prime rib, you're basically cooking at usually a higher temperature, and you want to smoke it maybe for an hour. You can put it in the oven after that. So,
any further tips on that you want to share with the other dads that are out there?
Well, I have not perfected the prime rib. I have perfected brisket. I don't usually say I've done anything well, but I perfected the brisket. And the trick with brisket, you leave it out all night on the counter before you start smoking. You start smoking at 6 a.m., but you leave it out on the counter, let it get up to room temperature. If you get meat from a good butcher, it's very unlikely that it has any disease problems or anything like that. You're not going to get, and you're going to cook it to temperature anyway. If you let it warm up, you can smoke it for much, much longer. You form a good bark on it. You don't have to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. That is my secret, and it turns out pretty well.
Preference in butchers for those that are in the Portland area?
Gardiner's Country Meats in Portland on Killingsworth, which I drove by to get to this restaurant.
Very good, which is non-described. Let's see here. Favorite tool in the toolbox or the garage? Just so you avoid calling me a tool.
You know what? I'm gonna go with a traditional thing and say a drill or a screwdriver, because my dad got me. Cordless drills and screwdrivers are very in. I had a cordless drill, and it basically after a year went like the battery just gets crappy. You just can't use it. So I have a corded drill. That is my favorite tool because you know what? It never runs out of batteries, and I have cords everywhere.
You always struck me as a corded driller anyway.
Yeah.
So, beverage of choice.
I thought about this one. I don't know. I drink a lot of water, frankly. But
Portland water just tastes much better.
Portland water is excellent. You can
anywhere
drink it
else.
Regardless, you don't have to filter it. It's fantastic. Water in general is my beverage of choice. I love scotch, but getting old, I can't drink as much scotch anymore.
Who cooks in your family?
We both do. I get a lot of credit for the barbecues. We have a lot of parties, and so I get a lot of credit for cooking special occasion meats like briskets. But, those are really easy. Honestly, you just put them on the thing and you turn on the temperature and it goes. So
you and Christina throw phenomenal parties.
We like to party. But my wife and I pretty much share the cooking responsibilities. She does all the shopping on Sunday, and then we each cook meals depending on what practices we've got and all that stuff.
All right. Stick or automatic?
I am an automatic person. If I was to race, I would want to stick.
All right. Man cave, a thing or no?
You know what? We are thinking of making our third floor into a man cave, so the upper floor.
All right.
Yeah.
All the way up?
All the way at the top.
Okay.
But I have to insulate it and do a lot of HVAC and stuff to make it livable in the summer.
Sure.
Yeah. But it'll be a person cave. Unless I convert. Actually, okay, no, wait. My idea is to make an outside patio bar thing. So it's Oregon, so you can't really do this lightly, right? But it's going to be like, eventually in the corner of my backyard, be a roofed thing that comes out like that and has a little bar where you can sit, and it's powered, and I have a little TV back there, and I have little propane heaters and stuff like that.
Very cool.
So
very cool. We have a history on this that the audience doesn't necessarily know about.
Farts are funny.
Okay. You were the dog.
Always me. Take credit for your shit.
Just don't tell people who don't need to know about it.
Oh, no, this is internal. This is within the family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you... baseball game. When you go to a baseball game, do you sit on the first base side or third base side?
Not a baseball guy.
Not a baseball guy. It doesn't matter to you.
No.
All right. Fine.
Sorry. I would say first base.
That's totally fine.
Okay.
What's your biggest challenge right now? As a father.
Finding a job. As a father?
As a father.
I spent a lot of time with my kids over the holidays. And and I think this is a challenge for any parent, so I'm being completely honest here, but the challenge is when you spend a ton of time with your kids, it's wanting to spend more time with your kids. It's wanting to, like, when they want to do the same thing again, play the same game 87 times or something like that.
Right.
It's wanting to keep doing those things.
Watching Home for the 87th time.
Right. Yeah.
Why aren't you into this, Dad?
Right. And being present and being engaged and being into it. And believe me, it's not that much of a challenge. We let them watch a lot of TV for the winter, but anyway.
Biggest challenge in the future as a father?
Probably adolescence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were
Yeah.
Yeah. Teenage years are fun.
Mm-hmm.
What are your greatest fears for your children?
Well, my greatest fears for my children are they won't be responsible for themselves or critical thinkers. My biggest fear for myself in regards to my children is that they won't want to talk to me when I'm old.
Okay. Hardest moment as a father?
Man, I don't know. I haven't had one that I would consider to be hard, knock on wood. I got to say, I've taken Felix to the dentist twice in the last 3 weeks to get fillings. That's not easy.
Sure.
I'm sure it's not easy for him either, but like, I don't like the dentist in the first place, and having to sit and watch the other person when he's 7 get drilled and like have his feet jiggle when they shoot him with a Novocaine, like, whoa. Right. Anyway, that's not really on the scale of hard. Anyway, I'm good.
Have your children seen you cry?
Absolutely, I'm a total crier.
Yeah?
Yeah, I cry in Moana. Absolutely, no problem.
Yeah. Well, that song.
Yeah.
And when she's talking about, like, yeah.
No, I cry at the drop of a hat.
They were Voyagers.
I know. Well, we talked about that.
They were Voyagers.
I know. And I want my daughter to be a Voyager, and I want to be a Voyager too. And I just tap my microphone, so that's not going to come out very well, but we all want to be Voyagers, and that's all there is to it.
Very good. How do you want to be remembered?
As a good person.
That's what you want your children to remember you?
Mm-hmm.
Very succinct. That's great.
That's all there is to it, man. I feel like that. I get it. I feel like there's a bunch of things.
This isn't judgment, so.
No, I know. Yeah, I'm just explaining it. I think that, to clarify, we think of careers, we think of what have I accomplished, we think of all these things, and what I want to be is that person that you found out donated to that charity all their lives, only you never really knew it, and then the person dies, the man or the woman dies, and they're like, oh wow, they donated like $100,000 to that charity. Like, you didn't even know it. That's how I want to go out. Like,
I don't have money, so I donate blood.
No, yes, that's what I mean. Like, it does. I didn't mean it that. I don't have a job, man. So
yeah, I get it.
That idea of like, I'm not a big Twitter. The whole idea of bragging about everything you do all the time. Like, I don't like that. And so now, just for being remembered as a good person by my kids, I don't even care if other people remember that way.
All right. Well, we've got quite a bit accomplished. Well, actually, I don't know if we actually did or not, but we got a lot of questions done, and we got really, really deep.
We did.
And I really appreciate the time that you spent and the thought that you've put into all of this.
I appreciate you doing this video cast. Vlog? Do they still call it a vlog?
I like to think of it as a web series. Vlog sounds a little too hipsterish, but whatever label you want to put on it is totally fine.
Well, I appreciate you doing this. I think it's a good conversation to have with lots of different people, and I will keep watching. Everybody else keep watching, not just this episode, which is probably the best so far. But no, I thank you for doing this, and really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, with that, go ahead and put that beer down. Still got a couple of things to go.
Mm-hmm.
If you will indulge me, if you're willing to play along, are you willing to share a message to an adult Ada and Felix?
Yes. So, well, you've already heard sort of my hopes and dreams for you. I will love you no matter what. And if I'm hopefully not gone, but if I'm gone, remember that I did love you more than anything else, you and your mother. So thank you for everything that you've made me so far, and I look forward to everything that you'll become.
You have been one of the best friends that I've ever had.
Wow.
And you have been magnanimous. You have been generous, not generous.
Mm-hmm.
You've been there.
Chandler.
This is true. You've been there for me at some of my worst moments. and it's shown me tremendous amount of support. And to have you on this episode is something incredibly special to me. I actually didn't want to have you on one of the earliest episodes, but only because I wanted to build into a thing that would be worthy of having you on it. But my own excitement about having you on this show won out. And a certain amount of your availability right this moment certainly helped.
I have a job.
He's hireable, folks. So with that, I want to say thank you. I love you. And I can't think of a better person to have on this show.
Well, that's very kind of you, Matt. Thank you very much.
We're going to take it down a note.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite dad joke?
I know. Okay, so this is my problem. Is my favorite dad joke. I like to tell the long ones with a really crappy ending, right? Okay.
Right.
So
you've got 10 minutes, so we're good.
Well, I know, but pressure from
Right.
the restaurant. So I can't take credit for this joke. Actually, Ben Houston told me this joke. Another great dad, and he told me this joke, I think, in college. But all right. So man's dream is to go to France, and he finally goes to France, and he's so excited about it. And he does all the things you do in France. He goes to the Eiffel Tower. He goes to the Seine, and he goes on a river tour, and he goes to Notre Dame, and he goes to the south of France, and does all this stuff. But the most exciting thing for him, because he loves like French Impressionists and stuff like that, he loves Van Gogh. He goes to a real absinthe bar, and he has absinthe, which is the green liqueur you can get in France, and you pour it over sugar cube and all this kind of stuff. And they used to think it was poison because it made people so demented. Anyway, he had absinthe, and he just loved it. And he went to a number of different bars that Van Gogh used to go to and all this stuff. So he was so excited about it. So he comes home, and, he's just telling everybody about his trip to France. And he goes home one night, and all of a sudden, his stomach's upset. And it's this weird thing. And it's like he's got really bad gas. And so he passes gas, and it makes this really weird sound. It goes, Honda. And he's like, what the hell is that? And it's like he has these bad farts. And they come out and they go, Honda. Like, this never changes. And it's just, he's weirded out. He's really kind of freaking out, right? And it happens, it doesn't stop. It happens for 2 or 3 days in a row. So he's like, I got to make an appointment with a doctor. So he goes to the doctor. And he's like, the doctor's like checking him for stuff. And he's describing the problem. And the doctor immediately, and this is where the joke can get really drawn out. And it can get drawn out in France too. So you have to really make it a long, long joke. So you got a lot of time on the beach or whatever. But the doctor's like, have you been to France recently? He's like, Jesus, doctor, how'd you know this? Like, did I gain weight from the cheese or something like that? Like, what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, no. It's okay. Did you drink any absinthe? He's like, oh my God, like, what? How would you even possibly understand? And he's like, well, sir, don't you understand? Absinthe makes the farts go Honda.
That's a good one.
So the problem, of course, with that joke is that absence makes the hearts grow fonder is not a common saying anymore. So I told that joke in my physical therapy group where there's a whole bunch of 20-year-olds, and they're like, okay, Mike, do you want to keep pushing on the... you want to keep pushing your leg there? You want to keep going with this?
All that and more.
Uh-huh.
All right. Fantastic. Well, it's been a fantastic time sitting down and sharing with you.
It's been excellent.
I really appreciate it. To dads.
To dads.
Both here and there.
Mm-hmm. Dadmiration to you. OG. The OG. Can you see his hair? I mean, come on. Like, lean into the shot. Oh, my God. Look at Mike.
Well,
no, look at that. Nope.
All right. Well, if we're going to do this.
No. Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, if we're going to do this.
Don't encourage me.
Yeah, well, it's a little too late now. Flop this all out like this.
He looks like the guy.
Terrible.
He looks like the dude that died. He looks like that one guy from Homeland. He probably hasn't died already.
He's fine. He's fine.
Right.
He's fine. He's pining for the fjords.
Yep, he's good.
All right. Have a good
Cheers,
one,
dude.
man. Take care.
Take care. You too.
Seriously, and I mean seriously, I've had to lose some serious hairs asleep because of this perilous pair of trees in the street. Oh, waving goodbye, bye, and everybody's talking about the times of the sun. And now, thank you for the haircut, Sanders and thanks for the trim. Thank you for the haircut, Sanders and thanks for the trim. places and things, and it's not